Indians are loud. Indians smell. We've seen that in my other videos. But now watch what Asia is actually doing with that premise. One Asian country is throwing Indians into interrogation cells, and another is sending recruiters to Delhi to beg them to come. The lazy take is that Asia is just racist.
I'm racist.
But racism isn't this organized, and it isn't this specific. Something older is running underneath this. What Asia is actually afraid of is a question, of which this video is the answer. Jeju sells itself as Korea's Hawaii. Honeymoon resorts, tangerine farms, a visa-free program open to citizens of 111 countries. It's the most welcoming brochure in Asia. It is also a brochure with a trapdoor. Someone found the trapdoor the fun way. 38 hours in a windowless room. Food that didn't qualify as food. A phone they wouldn't let him touch. While his mother-in-law was still forwarding the honeymoon itinerary to the family group chat. When Korean authorities finally put him on a plane, airline staff reportedly charged him full last-minute price for his own deportation flight. It had the pricing structure of a kidnapping, minus the ransom note, plus a fuel surcharge. To continue, you have to understand what Korea thinks Korea is. Korean schoolbooks, well into the 2000s, taught children that Korea was a one-blood nation. A single people, descended from a single ancestor, uniquely pure, uniquely continuous. A whole generation of Korean border officers grew up inside a story where letting a stranger in was a genetic event. But on the other side, Jeju actually does have a smuggling problem, and it is even more stupid than anything you are currently imagining. On January 15th, 2025, Korean police caught 11 Vietnamese nationals and a Korean broker trying to escape Jeju for the mainland, hidden in a 5-ton cargo truck. In the actual freight hold, stacked like bok choy, brokers were charging roughly 2.5 million won per head, about $1,800, to smuggle people out of the island inside produce shipments, and unauthorized attempts tripled in a single year. But a country with a healthier relationship to outsiders would route that problem through case-by-case suspicion. A country still marinating in one-blood nation routes it through everybody with a brown passport. You know what is an even bigger problem? That you're not subscribed yet. Please do so as soon as possible. If you're already subscribed, just comment down what topic I should discuss next. 3 hours by plane from Jeju. It's Tokyo. They are having the opposite public breakdown about the exact same people. Japan's foreign resident population crossed 4.12 million by the end of 2025. On the east side of Tokyo, there is a neighborhood called Nishikasai, where the grocery stores carry paneer, the schools teach in English and Hindi, and the 7-Eleven parking lot smells like cardamom at 6 in the evening. Japan has been building a little deli next to a vending machine for the better part of 15 years and has never once said it out loud in public. That silence is not an accident. In Japan, there is this concept called hone and tatemae. Roughly, your true feelings versus your public face, which is considered adulthood. You say what the room needs to hear, you keep what you actually think in private. And the gap between the two is how a polite society stays functional. A Japanese person who blurts their hane in public is not being honest. Now apply that to immigration. Japan's hane is that Japan is not an immigration country. That sentence is still said on the record in press conferences in 2026. Japan's tatame is 4.12 million foreign residents, a little deli next to a vending machine, and a restaurant sector where the spreadsheet literally ran out of room to hire more foreigners this year. Both things are true at once. A Japanese listener is not supposed to notice the contradiction. The foreign worker conversation in Japan is therefore not really a conversation. It is a society doing something in private that it refuses to narrate in public. That is why you can read 1,000 Japanese articles about labor shortages and regional revitalization and specified skilled workers and never once read the word immigrant. The word itself is considered rude, but Japan is importing people. Japan refuses to admit it is though, and the gap between those two things is cultural maturity, operating exactly as designed, and producing a country where 4 million foreigners live without ever being officially acknowledged as guests of the nation they are quietly propping up. So one Asian country is kicking Indians out the front door, and another is letting them in the service entrance. If Asia just hated Indians, Tokyo would not have a little deli. The stereotype version cannot explain the map. The actual answer is buried in how these countries define the word us. Japan and Korea both run on jus sanguinis, citizenship by blood. You can be born in Osaka, go to school in Osaka, speak only Japanese, and still not be Japanese because your grandparents weren't. There are 5th-generation Zainichi Koreans in Japan right now, who have never lived anywhere else, and are still legally and socially not Japanese. Once you see that, the tourist versus worker thing clicks. A specified skilled worker is not threatening to this system, because he arrives pre-labeled as someone else's responsibility. He has a sponsoring company, a named employer, a scheduled end date. The country does not have to decide what he is, because a corporation has already decided for them. A tourist is much scarier. A tourist walks up to the border, claiming to be a person, with no Japanese or Korean entity vouching for his existence, and the cultural machinery in these countries has no native slot for a person who is not from here, and not attached to someone from here. A specified skilled worker is a verb. A tourist is a noun. They don't know where to put. Jeju's cell and Tokyo's welcome pamphlet are not opposites. They are the same culture asking the same question. Is this person legible to us as something other than Japanese or Korean? Now, the grim part. Stay with me. Japan had 686,000 babies born in 2024, the lowest number since they started counting. South Korea's fertility rate is 0.72, the lowest number ever recorded by any country not actively at war, currently fighting with Thailand. See my other video about that. But many countries, without coordinating anything, collectively decided to stop producing children. You already know the demographics. What you may not have thought about is the emotional shape of what those numbers produce. Confucian societies run on filial piety. The deepest, oldest, most sacred social obligation in Japan, Korea, and China is that you take care of your parents when they get old. Not in an abstract Hallmark card way. In a literal, wipe their bodies, cook their food, sit with them until they die way. A good Japanese or Korean person does not outsource their parents to a stranger. A good Japanese or Korean person does not outsource their parents at all. That was the deal, except the numbers are in now, and the deal is broken. There are not enough children to keep the deal. 80-year-olds in rural Chiba have one daughter who moved to Tokyo for work, and one son who is, in the polite local phrase, not quite ready to run a household. That grandma in rural Chiba is going to be wiped, cooked for, and kept alive by someone. And it is not going to be her daughter. This is the cultural nightmare under the entire story. Not labor shortage, a civilization built on the idea that your family takes care of its own, being forced to admit that the family cannot do it anymore.
I can't move it anymore. What is it?
And having to bring in a stranger, and then having to bring in a foreign stranger. Having to accept that the most intimate moment of a Japanese or Korean grandparent's life, the moment of being fed, cleaned, and carried, is being handled by someone whose first language isn't even the one grandma dreams in. If you're watching this thinking, at least Japan is being nice about it, I need you to sit down. Earlier this year, a Japanese commentator went viral across South Asia for speaking directly to young Bangladeshis thinking of applying to work in Japan. His message was, roughly, don't come. You will not be building a future. You will be what he openly called a corporate slave. You will do the jobs Japanese people refuse to do in sectors specifically chosen because local kids will not touch them. And when your visa expires, the system would politely prefer you vanish before the word permanent enters your head. The interesting part of that warning is not that it sounds racist, it's that the word he used is a Japanese self-diagnosis. Japan has a word for working yourself to death at a company, karoshi. Japan has a phrase for companies that grind workers down on purpose, black companies. An entire generation of Japanese young people is fleeing the salaryman contract because they watch their fathers disappear into it and come home ash-colored at 62. The corporate slave role was not invented for Indians. It was filled for decades by Japanese men who had no cultural permission to say no. What's happening now is that Indians are being inserted into the system. Japan has been running on its own sons for half a century, at exactly the moment Japan's own sons stopped showing up, which makes the whole thing darker than a plain racism story. A Japanese manager looking at an Indian worker across a factory floor is not thinking, I will treat you worse because you are foreign. He is thinking, I will treat you the way I was treated, because that is how this works, and because the Indian worker has none of the cultural cushioning that lets a Japanese salaryman absorb it. Family, friends, and culture is nowhere to be found. Back to Sachin, sitting in his windowless cell at Jeju, not knowing any of this. If his plane had landed at Narita instead, on a worker visa sponsored by a nursing home in Chiba, he would have cleared Japanese immigration in 40 minutes, and a staff member would have handed him an orientation pamphlet in Hindi at the exit. He would have been at work by the end of the week. The stereotype was never the point. Asia does not think Indians smell. At least that's not the reason. Instead, Asia thinks anyone who walks up to a border without a Japanese or Korean entity vouching for them is walking up to a country that does not have a cultural slot for them. And if you're watching this feeling clean because your country would never do that, I have unpleasant news about every work permit system from Dubai to Texas. Bring in cheap labor under a corporate sponsor, then deport the moment the economy sneezes. That is not an Asian invention. It is the global operating system. Asia is just running it with less marketing and more honey.